Hello friends, welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. Welcome to Newby Tuesdays. Today we are going to build a full stack application. We're going to build a URL shortener. Tony is caught in traffic, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce the project, kind of talk about what we're going to do, and he will eventually call in and we'll get that going. But if you look in the video description, there is a link to this repo. And essentially we are going to be creating a URL shortener. If you're watching live, please throw a message in the chat, say hello. Welcome to Emmy, welcome Bob, welcome Kaizen, welcome to the stream. It's going to be a good time. If you're not familiar with URL shorteners, there is a pretty popular one called bit.ly or bit.ly. And essentially you can paste a link in and it gives you a really short URL that you can share, like maybe on a mobile phone or something like that, where you wouldn't have to type out the full URL. So for instance, if I create a short URL for this GitHub repo that we have today, and I actually bought a domain, puny.ly, we're going to be punyly, is the name of our app. But you could take a URL, throw it into a service like this, and then it gives you back this really short URL. And the idea is you can share this URL. So I'll share this in the chat. And if you click that, I guess I'll click it, it actually just redirects to, well, if we go to it, it redirects to the URL that you shortened. So that's pretty much what we're going to be implementing today. We'll have a front end where you can put in a URL and put in whatever, and actually we're going to allow you to customize it. A service like this just gives you like a random string. We're going to let you put in like a descriptive word, and then when you go to the site / that word, it will redirect to the URL that you shortened. We are going to be using all JavaScript, so we're going to use node.js on the back end. We'll be using Express as our server, and we'll be using MongoDB as our database, with Monk as the package to talk to our MongoDB. In previous full stack episodes, you've seen that we actually separated the code out into a client folder and a server folder, and those two were two different servers. You had your backend server and then you had your static server running. Today we're going to do all of this in the same folder. So our server is actually going to serve up our front end code as well. We're going to have a super basic front end, so we're not even going to use the view CLI. We're just going to bring in view as a script tag. We're going to use Bulma CSS today. In the past we've used like Bootstrap, but Bulma is just another CSS framework. I'll show that. We can look at the documentation, and a CSS framework basically gives you some pre-configured classes to apply to your site to give you nice styles. So you have things like components, or elements like button. And so you get buttons that look nice like that by default. You just add some classes to it. And so we're going to use this to get some basic styling. Hey, James, welcome to the stream. Cool. Tony is stuck in traffic. I don't want to do too much without him. I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions in the chat before I do anything? Like I said, I apologize for Tony being late. I also don't want to get too far ahead without him asking questions and things like that. Yeah, we can kind of talk about the layout as well. So we'll have a basic page, even more basic than this. It's just going to have a place where you can put in your URL, a place where you can type in what you want the name to be in the URL, and then you click create. That will send a request to our backend. Our backend will then receive that request, which should be a post request. We'll validate the information, and then we'll make sure that that name is not in use. So for instance, you'll be able to create a link like puny.li/cg, or like Coding Garden or something like that. And if we went to this link, this would redirect to coding.garden. But before we create that, we would have to look in the database to make sure that no one else has created a link with that name. And so we'll make sure that happens, and if it's available, if no one has used it before, then we'll insert it into the database. Otherwise, we'll respond with an error if it's in use. And then lastly, we'll create a route to redirect to a URL. So in Express, we can actually create a route that will match anything after the slash. So if a request is made for something like this, we don't have to pre-configure all the routes with those possible names. We can make a route that will essentially be able to catch any request that comes in, and then we can look up that name in our database, and if we find it, redirect the user. If not, then we'll show a 404 not found page. I do plan to deploy the site, and I am going to alias it because I bought this domain earlier, punily. So puny, it's like a play on Bitly. Get it? Huh? Okay. And if we have enough time at the end, we'll do potentially logging links to a click, so you can see like how many times your short URL got clicked and when it got clicked, and we'll have a page where you can go to see that information. Cool. Can I do a poll in the chat? No. I guess I could do it on discussion. All right. If you're watching right now, what do you want me to do while we wait for Tony? If I go to my channel and then discussion, I think I can do a poll here. Can I? It may not be enabled on my channel just yet. Nope. There was the live poll I used a while back. Direct poll. Because basically, I want to ask you in the chat, what do you want to see? What should I do? Anonymous. Emmy is asking, is it my internet or the stream that is chopping? It is my internet. OBS is telling me that it's dropping frames. Actually, because we have time, I will be right back. I'm gonna go reset my router and then see if that will fix the frame rate drop issue. So, don't go too far. Okay, I think that fixed it. If I have stopped jumping around the screen and clipping, please let me know. For whatever reason, I had to reset my router and I just restarted my streaming computer. Cool. But OBS is showing a good frame rate now. There was the live poll that I did like way back in the day. It's good. Awesome. Kaizen says it's good. Actually, I'm just gonna go way back to like one of my first live streams. Requests for videos for Coding Garden. This is when I use like an anonymous poll. There we go. This site. Polly. There we go. Okay, my question is, what should we do while we wait for Tony? And my name is CJ. I'll add some options. Just get started. He can pick up when he gets here. I don't know if there are any other options, but I will send this poll out right now, and you have the option to add an option. There you go. And I think this will update in real time. Let's see. Also, if you have any thoughts for like topics you'd like me to explain, like maybe talk about what is MongoDB or something like that. I'll add that as an option. Explain what is a database. Let us ask you questions about it. Yeah, absolutely. If you want to make this an Ask Me Anything, please do. If you want to know about what I've done and what I've coded, or you have questions about my opinions on things like semicolons, I actually prefer semicolons. Two votes for let us ask questions about who you are. This is my break timer. Let's take a quick stretch. Cool. And also, Professor Elements, welcome to the stream. I did not welcome you. One vote for just get started. He can pick up when he gets here. Any new votes? I will say, if you do have questions about, I don't know, my opinions on things or anything else like that, just feel free to throw those in the chat. I think I'll just get started because I have been going. Actually, I don't know how long the stream has been going, but I set a time. You came here to see the thing. Let's build the thing. Okay, and I'll be sure to go very slow, explain everything as I'm going, and if you have any and all questions, please ask them in the chat. I will be sure to answer those questions. And Tony, he will be here soon. He said the weather's pretty bad where he is at in the world, which is Columbus, Ohio. Okay, so first thing is we're going to create our server folder. So actually, here. No, not there. Here. So I'm in this directory, the URL Shortener. If you cloned it down from GitHub, you'll be in there too. And first thing we want to do is create a... Actually, yeah, we'll create a server directory. Never mind. So make directory server. And inside of this directory is where all of our server-side code is going to go. The first thing is to initialize npm. So when you're building a project with backend JavaScript and Node, npm is used to manage all of your packages and dependencies. So if you're familiar with front-end development, this would be like synonymous with adding like a script tag to jQuery or a script tag or a link tag to Bootstrap in your HTML. Those are bringing in external libraries. On the back end, npm is how we bring in external libraries to a backend app. So to do that, first we do npm init. This creates a thing called the package JSON, and this keeps track of all our dependencies. So if we look in the server folder, that created our package JSON, and there's a few things in here, like what is the name? Let's give it a name. Puny.li, description, a full stack URL shortener, and you have author, and then you can specify your open source license. Professor Elements is asking, what am I using for my code editor? So I'm using VS Code. And I have quite a few extensions installed. Specifically to make it look like this, I'm using the SETI Monokai color theme. And actually, I installed Material theme, and it installed this other option for color theme config. Yeah, so change accent color. And this, so I have the material theme installed inside of VS Code, and then it gives you this option where you can set an accent. So I set my accent as acid lime, but I think you can choose other things like pink. Yeah, and even though I'm not using the material theme right now, it still affects the accent, which is pretty cool. Change accent, I like acid lime. And in terms of extensions, I have a few color themes. Right now I'm using SETI Monokai. I do have Atom Keymap installed, so I've been using Atom for a very long time, and I've only been using VS Code for probably a month or so, and Atom Keymap will add a lot of the common keyboard shortcuts you're used to inside of Atom, inside of VS Code, so it makes it a little bit easier to get used to. I use auto close tag. Whenever you're working in HTML, it automatically closes the tags. Auto rename tag, so that's when if you're in HTML and you're editing the tag name, it automatically edits the other tag name too. Beautify formats your code. other various things. Yeah, git blame is also installed. You'll see if this thing is a Git repository, you'll notice how wherever my cursor is, it says who committed that line of code. And so if you're working on a larger project, it'll actually tell you like which actual user. You can disable that though. Toggle line blame annotations, yeah, and that turns off. And I think that's pretty much it. I do have Vter installed, so I do a lot of Vue.js development, and this is awesome with VS Code. It adds really good suggestions in autocomplete and things like that. Yeah, cool. So that's all my things. I think I just got a message from Tony, maybe? Yo, hey, Tony. You ready? Cool, and a message from Tipsy in the chat. Any chance you can make a video in the future on how to deploy Vue.js in Heroku and GitHub pages? Yes. Typically, I like to deploy something like a Vue.js app to a static host rather than something like Heroku, but it is possible. You could probably find a Vue.js Heroku build pack. That might be the thing you search for if you want to do that. And then for GitHub pages, for that, you either have to use Vue.js as a CDN, or you can build your Vue.js app and put that on the GitHub pages branch, and that would work too. But that'd be good to do. I'd like to do a whole episode just on deployment in general, like how do you get your things on the internet. All right, let's call Tony.
Hey.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Just a second. Let me make this.
Okay.
Oh, I need to affect not multi-output. This needs to be HDMI. Okay, say a thing.
Thing.
Cool. I think that's working.
Are we streaming?
We are streaming. We're already live, Tony. Everybody can hear you right now.
Wow. Okay, cool.
Cool. Anyone watching live, please let me know if you cannot hear Tony. I'll turn him up for sure. Let's do this. Whoa, what's happening?
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, it's all good. Did my Discord just crash? Cool. Let's start.
Technical issues today.
Yeah, lots of issues. There's the weather. My stream was skipping. And here we go. Oh, actually, I need to share this link with you. Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to hide my
We're going to get through this.
We are. I'm going to hide my screen real quick so that no one tries to join the screen share. Here we go. You see that, Tony?
Yes, so that's the code I used to get on the Zoom?
I believe so. If you go to like join screen share and put that code in, that should work. Thanks everyone for your patience. We're gonna get there. And actually, Tony, we only got as far as creating the npm package JSON. Oh, there's Tony. Hey there. Okay. And Tony, I have given you remote control of my computer. Are you still there?
All right, so we created the server filter.
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
Let me.
I'm gonna go ahead and put an X in there.
Oh, okay. Good job, Tony. And then we initialized npm. So I just talked about like what is initializing npm and what does that do. And I think by now, Tony, you have recognized that initializing npm creates this package JSON. Can you give like a your idea of what is the package JSON?
I feel like it's almost like you're getting in a spaceship and you're just turning it on and it's taking you like autopilot.
Okay.
You're still flying the ship, but but the ship is
But
like
but what does it? I
putting
understand
everything.
you're trying to come up with an analogy, but what does it do? What is it for?
So basically, you're setting up like all your backend stuff, like all your dependencies and all your stuff that you're going to be able to use for your project.
Yes, yeah. So we're going to be using Express and a package called Monk and various other things. So all of that's going to get stored. Well, the versions of the packages we're going to be using are going to get stored in here. Okay, so we have that. Now we need to install these things. So that. Um, in this folder, Tony, please do an npm install of Express, Morgan, Body Parser, and NodeMon. And then we'll talk about what each of those things does. So Express, do an npm install. Express is a package for building backend APIs. So if you've ever interfaced with a weather API or the Reddit API, or like last night I was talking to an images API, Express allows us to create our own APIs. Morgan, and you can put all of these on the same line. So you can just do, you already installed Express, so just do Morgan space body parser space nodemon. Don't install that. Nodemon with no dash. But yeah, so that's Express. Morgan is a package for logging. So whenever we do any sort of request to our server, that will automatically log the request that came into the server for us. So that's pretty convenient.
Okay, go ahead and press enter.
No, Tony, look, you're looking at. Can you see my mouse? These are the packages you want. Spell them exactly like that.
Oh.
Body dash parser. And Body Parser is a package that allows our server to receive data from clients. So we're going to be building a front end that sends data to our back end to store the URL and the name in the database. And so Body Parser helps with that. And then NodeMon is a package that will automatically restart our server if we ever change the backend code. Cool. Oh yeah, Tony, and the name of our service is puny.li. I actually bought this domain.
That's cute.
Isn't it? Just real quick though, I need to copy this because hopefully at the end of the episode we can actually deploy it and it will actually work at that URL. It'll be cool. Okay, so we added all of those packages, and if we look at the package JSON, you'll notice there's now this dependencies section, and all of those are listed there. So the idea is if someone pulls this package down from npm, when they do an npm install, it's going to install all of those things by default. They won't have to manually put in those dependencies. One thing we should do, Tony, is create a git ignore file, because when we push to GitHub, we don't want to push up our node modules directory. So I have a command on my machine called git ignore. So just do git ignore space node, all one word, git ignore. Yeah, so it's a special package called git ignore, and it automatically creates a git ignore file for a project that is node. Yeah, hit enter. And then you'll see that it generated this, and it just has some defaults, but the main thing that we care about is that it's ignoring node modules, because there's a lot of stuff in here, and we don't want to push that up to GitHub. So by putting it in the git ignore, that prevents us from pushing it up to GitHub. Cool. All right, add a start script and a dev script. So before we do that, Tony, well, actually, we won't do that just yet. So we want to start script. So in the script section, change test to be start, and then the value is going to be node space index.js, and pretty soon we'll create a file called index.js. Nose. No period at the beginning, just node index.js. Yeah, definitely. Cool. And then
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. And then on the next line, so do a comma at the end of that line, and on the next line we're going to create a development script, and this is the script that will automatically refresh the server if we make any changes. So dev, and then the value is nodemon space index. .js. Cool. And so now we have those. Now we want to create a file. So in the server directory, let's create an index.js file. You can, I'll do it for you. Cool. And if we look at our README, we did that. Yeah, I don't have it in our README, in our checklist, but we do want to just create a basic Express app. So now we're going to use all of those packages that we installed to create an Express app. First thing is to require in Express. So when you're building a backend app with Node, we'll say const express equals require. This is my break timer. Let's take a stretch. Did you have a long day, Tony?
I think it needs a picture of your face. Oh my god, dude. Yeah, I was in a laparoscopic robot case, and that was painful.
Laparoscopic robot? What does that do? What is that?
Basically, you know, like traditional laparoscopic surgery cases, they basically put like a bunch of little ports in your body, kind of inflate your belly, and they can basically, without opening you up, you know, perform surgery.
Never heard of it. Okay.
Well,
should we be talking
deal
about this on stream? So
no, like it's like, yeah, it's not like patient information or anything.
Well, no, I
It's
mean,
just,
but
like,
is it just gross?
So
Tony works as a
no.
He works as a
Surgical tech.
Surgical tech. So he's like a surgeon's assistant. He sees blood and guts.
Yeah,
all day.
basically, I'm like the guy. Yeah, so like without getting too gross, basically, instead of it having, you know, people's hands manipulating instruments that are in the ports, it's connected to a robot, which is controlled by the surgeon, who's sitting like on the other side of the room.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so basically you set up this giant robot, and it like essentially, you know, it's being controlled by a person, but you know, if you just look at it, the patient without that context, it looks like there's a robot operating on somebody. It's just wild.
Is the person operating the robot in the same room, or could they be at like some other hospital?
Yeah, like absolutely. Well, that's the thing is like technically like they could be somewhere else, but usually they're also in the room.
Wow, we are in the future, guys, and girls, and women. Anybody else that out there?
Since 1999.
They've been doing this since 1999.
Yeah, they've been doing well, they did the first like robot laparoscopic stuff, but they've technically have been doing laparoscopic stuff for a very long time.
Cool. We're gonna move on, Tony.
Like
we
the
don't talk about this
60s. Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Hey Brett, welcome to the stream. Emmy says she wants to be a remote surgeon, just sit on the floor at home and fix people. Yeah, that'd be cool. All right, so we're gonna build our backend app. So first do const express equals require express. And so inside of Node.js, this is how we actually bring in the Express package. Yes, just like that. Calculating, what? That must be one of my packages I have. Ignore that. Do a semicolon on this line. And then we're also bringing in Morgan. So const Morgan equals require Morgan. And so these exactly match up with the packages that we installed with npm install. Cool. And then we'll also bring in body parser. So do body parser camel cased. Oh, it's calculating the size of the package. That's pretty cool. My editor hasn't done that before. Maybe it's been broken. And it's body dash parser. Yep. And then what else? Do we bring in anything else? Let me see. No, that's it. Because nodebon is what we use here. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So now let's get our app up and running. So on that line, say const app equals express invoked. So express is a function, and by invoking it, we create a new express app. And so this is going to allow us to actually create our backend API. Cool. And then now these other two packages, Morgan and body parser, you could think of them like add-ons to our Express API, but they're called middleware. Essentially, they have access to the incoming request and can modify it or do something to it, like log it to the console. So on this line, we'll say app.use, and whoa, there you go. I think my autocomplete is being way too helpful lately. Yeah, app.use, and then say Morgan and invoke it, and then pass in the string tiny. So Morgan, and put it in quotes, yeah. Morgan is a tool for logging requests that come into our server. They have different ways of formatting the logs that come in. Tiny is just like one of the simplest ones that they have. Let's use single quotes. If you're new to JavaScript, it doesn't matter if we use single quotes or double quotes. I just like to be consistent, and I prefer single quotes over double quotes. Okay, so that's great. Put a semicolon on that line, and then on the next line, we're going to bring in body parser. Whoa.
Need a little help.
There you go. And app.use will say body parser.json. And then invoke that. And so this now allows our server to receive JSON from the client, and so it can actually use it. For all of these packages that we installed, they're on npm. So if you want to read about them, you can just go to npmjs.com. I believe it is. Yeah, npmjs.com. Search for the name of the package. You'll find it, and then they have documentation on how to use that. So this is basically what we're doing right now. We're setting up an Express app. If we searched for Morgan, we could see how to use that. And I believe they show an example with Tiny. Yeah. And then also body parser. Body parser has a lot more options and a lot of documentation associated with it, but we are just using the basic JSON parser by default. Awesome. So we got our app set up. Let's just do a simple hello world route for now. So do an app.get, and the first parameter will be a string with a slash, /, in quotes. Yes, cool. And the second parameter is our request handler. So you can do an arrow function for this. It takes in 2 parameters. So do parentheses before the fat arrow. Inside the parentheses, we have rec, R-E-Q, comma, res, R-E-S, yeah. And then make that a fat arrow, give it a body. This function is known as our request handler. It handles the incoming request. And on this line, we'll just say res.json. Actually, just do res.send. And then pass in the string hello world. Yes, that's the right number of exclamation marks. Single quotes, just because I prefer them. But what this is doing is this is creating a backend route. It says, when my server receives a GET request on /, we're going to send back the string hello world. So when you're interacting with APIs out there in the world, someone wrote code like this to decide what data to send back to you. So that's what we're going to be working with today. And the last thing is to start our app on a port. So create a variable called port, do const port, and set that equal to, let's do 5,000. And actually, before the 5,000, say process.env. Port in all capital letters. Space, or like the pipe, double pipe. Yeah, or 5,000. So eventually, when we deploy this, wherever we deploy it to might be listening on a different port, so we can just grab that from the environment. But when we're running the code locally, that listens on 5,000. And lastly, we will listen.
And
go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, Node will usually tell, like, when you do the run dev, like, where it's listening to the port at, correct?
Well, we have to do that ourselves, which is what we're about to do. Like, we essentially just do a console log that says listening on port. So if you do app.listen, and then the first parameter is port, and this is just going to be a fat arrow. So do empty parentheses, and then do your function, and then we can just do a console log. Say console.log. We'll do a template literal, so that's the backticks. He remembered where the key is, cool. And do listening on port. And then do a space and do $, curlies, and put the word port inside of it. And so this is what will tell us what port we're listening on. And when we deploy, if we were to actually like look at the server logs, we could see whatever port it was listening on. Okay, I think we're ready to go, Tony. Are you ready to go?
I've been ready.
Okay.
Born ready.
Cool. So now that we have this, so we have index.js. This defines our backend Express app. In the package JSON, we have this start script that essentially starts up the server. So you don't have to use that. You could just say node index.js, and it says listening on port 5000. But it's very convenient to have this start script, so that way when other developers are pulling down your repo, they can just do npm start, and it automatically starts running. And so now in the browser, if we go to localhost 5000, hello world. Good job, Tony. Cool. Okay, so we got our basic Express app going. And the other thing we did was, so instead of doing npm start, we can do npm run dev. And this starts the server with nodemon. So now anytime we make changes to our backend code, the server will automatically restart, because otherwise we would have to do that manually. So this works the exact same way. Yeah.
Quick question. Like when you run certain like node packages and it talks about like the favicon, like why does it do it on some things and not others?
When you mean like Express packages or?
I guess I don't know if it's Express, but like for example, like well, like in this one in the node, can you bring up the console again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like it says
that right
like
there?
it says get favicon.
Yes.
Yeah, like it
Okay.
sometimes doesn't say that.
So this is actually the browser doing this. So anytime you visit a website like google.com, if you've never visited that website before, your browser automatically makes a request for domain name.favicon.ico. And if it finds one, that's what it actually shows in the tab. If it doesn't find one, then it just shows like some generic thing like this. And so that's not our server doing anything. That's when the browser's making the request to the site, it automatically tries to find the favicon, and if it doesn't exist, it just gets a 404. And because we just set up this site, we don't have a favicon, so that's why it's showing that not found, like little document image. But is
Okay,
that...
and I guess the last couple of things we've been using use views, so it already has a favicon.
Yeah, so when you generate a Vue app, it has like a little Vue favicon by default, and so that exists, and then that's what actually shows up there. We could create a favicon if we wanted to and serve that up. But yeah, right now we don't have one, so that's why we're seeing that. Actually, there's a really interesting article out there about how the favicon was invented, and it was just basically like I think it was the developers of Netscape Navigator, maybe, or maybe it was Internet Explorer, and they one guy just decided to make it. And it was like, hey, look, if you put this icon in there, then in your bookmarks you get all these cool icons. And then server administrators started saying, hey, why am I getting all these requests for this thing called favicon? I don't even know what that is. But now pretty much everyone uses them. Okay. Where are we at? All right, awesome. So now let's start creating our front end. So inside of the server folder, and so Tony, the one thing we're going to do different this time is instead of having a separate client and server folder, we're going to create our public folder inside of the server and just have Express serve up that public folder. And
Okay.
If you watched our last episode, which was build a full stack message board, that one was deployed to two separate servers. So we had our back end running on Heroku and our front end running on now.sh. This time we can run the whole thing on either Now or Heroku, but it's all going to run on one server. So inside of here, we're going to create a public folder. Oh, that's not right. Publics. And
public is plural.
Oh, that's true. Is it? I don't know. What's the singular of public?
I think publi. I don't know. I don't know.
It's not a thing, Tony. Okay, so in there we're gonna create index.html. We'll create a basic HTML document. Yeah, this will work. Our title is going to be puny.li. What should our tagline be?
Shrinking Shrinking URLs since 2018.
Cool. I'll say shortening. Awesome. So that's that. Let's just do another. We'll do like an h1 that says puny.li, and then like an h3 below that with our tagline. Cool. Let's take a quick break. I seem to be yawning lately whenever I stretch. I'm not tired. I got plenty of sleep last night. I think. I don't know.
It's just like a response.
Yeah, response to. Yeah. Like you ever see a dog stretch and then they yawn at the same time. All right. Okay. So.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. I guess I didn't tell you this, Tony, but when I hear you, it's actually delayed because it's running through my streaming computer. So we might accidentally talk over each other sometimes, and I apologize for that. So
I apologize too.
Thanks. So okay, we have a basic HTML page. Now we want our Express server to serve up this whenever requests come in to the server. So. Well, before we do that, we'll go ahead and add view and add Bulma CSS. So first, we'll add Bulma. And so I didn't tell you this, Tony, but I've decided we're going to use Bulma. Have you used Bulma before?
I think I used it like once. I've mainly stuck to like Materialize.
Okay.
Whenever I'm doing stuff.
Right, but it's in the same category as like Materialize and Bootstrap. And let's install it. Getting started. So we can use a CDN, use the CDN.js, and we'll just grab the minified CSS. So this CSS we will add to the head as a link. Now we get Bulma, and then we'll also add Vue.js, and we can install that from CDN.js also. And the other thing, Tony, I don't know if I mentioned that to you, but we're just going to do a really, really basic Vue app. We're not even going to use the CLI to generate it. We're just going to add the CDN, and then we'll create a basic Vue app like that.
Okay.
So let's search for Vue. Simple, fast, and composable MVVM for building interactive user interfaces. Yeah, so this is the one we want. And so in our HTML, down here at the bottom of the body, we'll add a script that has Vue.js in it. And let's just do like a basic homepage layout. Curious, does Bulma have like a hero image or hero banner? Yeah, like one of these. Which tell me which color we should use.
Let's use that one right there. I like the gradient.
This one, yeah, it looks really cool. All right, so let's do this. And if you've never, go ahead. Were you saying something?
I was gonna say like, yeah, because all the stuff we've been doing with Vue, the hackathon I was telling you about this weekend, like I'm gonna try to convince everybody that we should use Vue when we do it.
They should. Like, Vue is really good for like rapid prototyping. Like, I just want to see if this thing will work. I'll maybe like fake the data and just get it up and running. Yeah, Vue is great for that. Okay, so if you've never worked with the CSS framework before, typically their documentation will look like this, and you say, hey, I want to use this thing, so you can copy in that HTML, you can put it in your app, and it should do what it says it's going to do. So our title is actually going to be puny.li, and our subtitle is going to be shortening URL since 2018. Okay. So that's like that. I think that's good enough. We'll have like this up at the top of the page, and actually let's just do a nav bar too. Cause why not? Yeah, I guess like one of these. Right? Just a nav, because it'll be like full width across the top. Actually, okay, so I'll add this real quick. And in a second, Tony, remind me about Bulma Swatch, which is like Boot Swatch, but for Bulma, maybe we can find some other theme we might want to use.
And I just want to say, like, ever since you told me, like, what the little burger thing is actually called, I've said that to people when I'm trying to say, like, how do you use a website? I'm like, click on the burger or touch the burger, and they're like, what?
Yeah, nobody knows what this is.
Like, no one knows what it is.
But if you ever seen this in a user interface, this is known as a hamburger menu because it's stacked like a hamburger. Yeah, and you see this on a lot of websites to like minimize the. Let's see, does Bitly have it if we make the page
And everyone knows what it is.
Yeah,
like everyone knows what it is, but like it's like one of those things that no one knows the name.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we should have a basic layout, but let's start serving up the front end from the back end and see what it looks like, because right now we have no idea what it looks like. So serving a public folder from Express. This is actually pretty easy. So right here. Express has a built-in middleware called static, so you can do app.use, and then you'll pass in, so invoke it, and then do express.static, and invoke that, and then pass in single quotes, /public. Cool. And so basically what we're telling Express is when a request comes in, check and see if that file exists in the public folder, and if it does, serve it up. So actually, I'm going to get rid of this default route now, because now when we go to our Express app, we should just see our index.html, because when we request / on the server, that automatically requests index.html. So let's see. So if I go and we go back to localhost 5000, there's our Bulma app. Oh, I was zoomed way in. Cool. Yeah, and real quick, let's go to Bulma Swatch. Maybe we'll find a different theme that we want to use. So Bulma Swatch is our free themes for Bulma. So you use all this. You can use all the same documentation and classes, but it has like a different style by default. So do you see any here that catch your eye, Tony?
I like that one with the light and shadow, with the little drop shadows.
Which one? What's it called?
Top right there.
This one?
Your mouse is just on it.
This
yeah.
one? Lumen. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And we can look at what its headers look like. Nice. Yeah, I like it. Okay. So to use this, we can click on the CSS, and now we just swap this in with the CSS that we brought in for Bulma instead. So we'll bring this one in instead. And now our site looks like that. Cool. What do you think, Tony?
Looks good. Really clean.
Really clean. Actually, I am gonna get rid of I'm gonna get rid of the navbar. What's that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, look at that, the top left on the page.
That does not look good. We'll just do that. And we gotta refresh. Yeah. And then we'll have just a nice little creation form right down here. Cool. All right, so we are now serving the public folder from Express. Before we move on, Tony, do you understand what's happening on this line of code?
Yes, so basically we're saying that we're going to use a static, which is a middleware part of Express, to serve a static version of the page on /public.
That's mostly correct. I'm going to give you a round of applause real quick. I'm going to go to my soundboard. Hopefully this isn't too loud. I don't think you'll be able to hear this, Tony. But Tony did good. So yes, so like express.static is a built-in middleware, and it's a middleware that basically has rules that say if a file exists in this folder, we'll just go ahead and serve up that file rather than having our own route that does something else with it. Awesome. I think all these streams are paying off, Tony. You're learning stuff.
Yeah, this is basically my coding boot camp every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday, cool. All right, so now let's create the form on the client, which the user will actually enter in to shorten their URL. So let's look at the Bulma docs real quick for how we create forms. We're gonna have a pretty basic form. It's just gonna have two fields. You'll have the URL and then whatever name you want to give that URL. I'm thinking we should probably do large, just because like it's like a super minimal site, so we can have like really big inputs. Cool. So this is what we want. I'm gonna copy it, but I have been coding a lot, so it's your turn, Tony. Now, right below this section, let me minimize this. Let's add another section. Actually, let's add a main. Yeah, and inside the main, let's add a form. Yep. And you can get rid of the action because we're going to handle it with view. And then inside of the form, do a new line, and then I will paste in what I copied, which is that input. And curious, we want like an input with a label. How we do that? Yeah, we'll do something like this actually. So field is horizontal. We'll update it. So yeah, I think it'll be exactly the same. The only difference is we're going to do is large, and the type is text. And we'll add a placeholder that says http://example.com. And the label on the form will say URL. Okay, let's see what we got so far. Cool. That's really big. We don't want that. Let's add some basic styles. So I'm going to create a style in the public folder. Let's call it style file, style.css. And Tony, create a selector for the main element and give it a width of 80%. Actually, there might be a built-in container class. But yeah, let's just do width 80%. And give it a no height, automatic height, and let's do a margin top of like 2em. Yeah, let's see what we get. Oh, we have to link the style file now. So in here, right below Bulma, we'll add a link for style.css. There we go. That's a little better. Yeah, actually, I mean, I kind of want it even smaller than that, don't you think? I don't know.
I don't know. I think it looks good.
Okay, Tony thinks it looks good. So we want to be able to say like URL there, cool, and then we'll put in the name right below that. So I'll copy this for you, but then you can update the things. So right below it, we want to change the label to say name. That. And then on line 45, we want the placeholder to be anything. Come up with something funny that has dashes in it. That's appropriate.
Something funny with dashes, like that means making shorter.
Sure, or just like a compound word with dashes or multiple words. Okay, super cat. Super catchy. This is great. Okay, I approve. Stop there. This is supposed to be a short URL thing. Yeah, actually, let's just do super catchy. Like how you think. Cool. I keep expecting it to auto refresh. It's not going to because we don't have that set up. All right, and then last thing is a button which will actually create the shortened URL.
Now this should be huge. The button should be bigger than the page.
Okay. Let's look at elements.
Maybe not that big, but
Yeah,
a
just
nice big old button.
as big as possible. There's the large button. We can probably modify the styles and make it even bigger though. So let's do this. Cool. Let's do a div. Punify.
Can we do a sort of loading thing that like whenever as it's doing it, like just there's like a tiny like little delay and it just says like shrinking
Yeah, absolutely. We could
or
do
something like that.
We could show like
And
funny loading messages, like counting eggs before they hatch. I don't know, just like random messages of what it might be doing behind the scenes. Oh wait.
Making all your problems go away. Yeah.
Let's look at their documentation to see if there's a way to do like a right aligned button.
I think we should center it like right underneath the inputs.
Okay. So let's give this a class. What do you want to call this thing?
Shrink button.
You keep saying
or puny button.
Puny button. And then in our CSS, we'll say puny button, text align, center. That doesn't look very center to me.
It seems kind of off because like even our stuff is not centered.
Let's see.
Like nothing seems kind of centered.
Oh, I guess that's true. Yeah, our main isn't centered. We need to do that. So we need to give this some margin. So let's say this: the top margin is 2em, right is auto, bottom is auto. I think that's the order that it goes in. Nope.
There you go. That looks better.
I think it's still off though. Is it? Is it top, right? Do you know the order that they go in? Okay.
I think it goes clockwise. I think it's top, right, bottom, left.
Okay. Let's see if I do that, what happens. Yeah, okay, that works. I think what's throwing me off is when it's here, these are on the same line, so it's a little bit shorter. I might actually want to put those on the line before it. I don't know. Either way, and then we do want to have a margin top of 2em. Yeah, like that. Cool. Okay, let's make this a different color. What color should our button be? I think if we look at bull mustache again.
Yeah, I think we should do something to contrast with our whatchamacallit. This might be a good time to disclose that I am colorblind.
Oh yeah.
So I have no idea what the other color is.
Yeah, I don't think we've mentioned that on the stream before, but Mr. Tony is colorblind. So, yeah, pick the one that stands out the most to you.
Is that middle one green or orange?
This one?
Yeah.
That's green. Do you like it?
Yeah, let's use that one.
Okay. I think it is just button dash success. Let's see. A button is success. Tony, list these colors from left to right. What's this?
On snippet, sea green, sea foam green.
What is this?
Pink, purple.
What is this?
Light blue.
What is this?
Like puke green, like baby green.
What is this?
Yellow.
And what is this?
Like a pinkish red.
Okay, you actually did pretty good. So, Emmy is asking in the chat, are you red-green colorblind? Or she asks, what kind of colorblind are you?
Oh, I think like it's like red or green colorblind, but I don't think that's a good term. There's like a proper term like protanatopia or something thing like that. I think it's someone with a P.
Sounds proper. All right, here we go, Tony. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I like it. Okay, so that's our front end. Let's check some boxes. We'll come back to actually making the form work after we create the backend routes. So let's do this after we do this. Okay, so now we're going to work on the backend code that will actually create the shortened URL in the database. So first thing is we need to add this package called monk. Monk is a library for talking to MongoDB. And there are other libraries out there, like there's a pretty popular one called Mongoose. If you've ever watched my videos with Feathers.js, that's what I use on that. And it is a much heavier package. There's a lot more involved. There's like schema validation. Monk is very simple and lightweight. All right, so do an npm install monk. Cool. And then now we'll do some things. So first thing is in our server folder, we'll create a folder called db. And in here, we'll create a new file. We'll call this connection.js. So this is going to be what actually connects to the database. So up at the top here, let's bring in monk. So just say const monk equals require monk. Cool. And then on the next line, we'll say, let's call this connection URL. And let's say equals process.env dot in all capital letters database underscore URI. Wait, no, say MongoDB URI. Underscore URI. Cool. And so when we deploy, this is where our database connection URL will be. But right now, it's a super simple thing. Just say or. And then in single quotes, localhost slash puny.li slash. Cool. And basically what this says is connect to the Mongo database on this computer with the database name puny.li. And actually, I don't know if we can have dots in the name. We'll do puny-li. And I actually have MongoDB running locally on my machine. You can visit the MongoDB website to figure out how to install it on your machine. If you're on a Mac, you can do brew install MongoDB, and that automatically installs it, gets it up and running, and you can use it locally. And then when we deploy, we're going to have to use a service to create a Mongo database so that we can actually talk to a server in the cloud. Okay. And now let's create a variable. Let's call it const db equals monk, and then invoke monk with the connection URL. Yes, and so this will tell monk to connect to the database at that URL. And then the last thing is we're going to export this db variable so that we can use it in another file. So say module.exports equals db. Cool. So now we have connected to the database, and the way MongoDB works is if this database doesn't exist, it will automatically create it for us, which is pretty cool. So that's our connection. Next thing is we're going to need some code to actually interface with the database. So I'm going to create a file. We'll call it urls.js. and this is going to be for creating and retrieving URLs from our database. So first thing is we're going to bring in that connection we defined. So say const db equals require, and then in single quotes do /connection. Yes. And this essentially is bringing in what we exported right here. So we define the connection in this file, and then we bring it into this file so we can now use it. Okay. First thing is we'll get access to the collection that we're going to be putting documents into in the database. So say const URLs equals db.get, and then invoke that and pass in a string URLs. So we're going to call this collection in our database URLs. Essentially, everything we create is in the URLs collection. Cool. Let's look at our README. We created the DB folder. We created the DB connection. And now we'll create a route to add a URL to the DB. So we've got this basic stuff going on. We'll come back to it. But now we need a route where we can actually call a method to add something to the database. So in our routes right here, and it's important that we do this after the app.use, because we want to make sure that our front end files are served up, and then anything else will be a request to make a new URL. So let's do app.post, and in single quotes do /:name. So this is a way to have a parameter in the URL where essentially when they make a post request to /supercatchy, we can then check and see if supercatchy is taken, and if it's not, create a URL with that name. And so now inside of the app.post, we'll add the request handler, so do a comma, and then add your parentheses with rec and res. Cool. And then after that, create your handler. Yep. And we'll do, actually, let's bring in URLs into this file. So right here, say const URLs equals require, and then do ./db/URLs. So we're not exporting anything just yet, but we're going to pretend like we are, and then we'll go and define the thing that we want to exist. So this is bringing in eventually whatever we're going to return from this file. So now that we have URLs, let's just say URLs dot create, and we'll pass in rec dot params dot name, comma, rec dot body. Yeah, and actually, instead of posting to :name, let's actually just do a post request to /. Simply, whenever we receive a post request, we'll just use the body of the request. This will all make sense once we start sending data from the client side, but essentially we're going to make a post request to / with the name and the URL, and that will be inside of the body. Okay. And for now, let's just leave that the way it is. We're going to go define this function called create, because we need to actually create the URL. So here we need a function called create. It's going to take in, I guess we're calling this URL, but URL, let's imagine this. Whoa. Okay, so the thing that we're going to be creating in our database is going to have a URL property, and that's going to be like example.com. And then the name will be something like super catchy. Like that. And so this is actually what we're going to be sending from the client side, and that's what we're going to be inserting into the database. So this is going to be what this variable right here is. What is a better name for that, Tony, than URL? Because I don't want to call it URL because it's it has a URL and a name. You get what I'm saying?
So we need like a name for the variable.
Yeah, like what would you call this?
Puny target.
I like the way you think. All right, let's take a quick break. I mean, honestly, we could call it puny. Like it's a little puny that we're about to create.
It's not a puny yet. We could call it not puny.
Almost puny.
Not puny. Like almost puny URL, and then like once we make it, it's called puny URL.
Wait, is that how I spelled puny? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, almost puny. Sounds good to me. Okay, and now, yeah, and so in my notes, I did say we're going to have the create route be at API/URL. Right now, it's just at slash. Yeah, let's do it at API/puny. So we're going to create a new puny when you make a post request to API/puny. Cool. So now in our README, we have validate the puny with joy. So basically, we're going to look at this, which is this object, and make sure that the URL does begin with like http:// or https, and then make sure that the name is alphanumeric with dashes. And in the README, I did say minimum 5 characters. Let's just say minimum 1 character and a maximum of 100 characters. So for this, we're going to use a library called Joy. And here it is, object schema validation. So this package allows us to give it a schema which says the URL property will look like this and the name property will look like this. And if they don't, it returns an error. So we're going to use this package to validate that thing before we put it into our database. Because one of the things about MongoDB is it doesn't do any validation for us. It'll let you just put anything into the database. So we do want to do some validation before letting whatever they're sending from the client just be directly inserted into the database. So here in the server folder, let's do npm install joy.
Got you.
He knew what to do. Okay. Now inside of here, we're going to bring in joy. So say const joy equals joy, or equals require joy. Awesome. And now we're going to create our schema. So we can look at their documentation. I guess they capitalized joy. We don't have, oh yeah, we'll capitalize it. So let's make this a capital joy. Whoa, I copied way too much. Yep. Okay, so we don't want to do this, and the two things that we want are the name and URL, and then we'll have to figure out what validations we use for those. But then we'll say that the schema must have a name and a URL. All right, Tony. So this first one needs to have a minimum of 1 character and a maximum of 100 characters.
Is this for the URL that they're submitting?
No, this is for the name that they're specifying, like something like super catchy.
Oh, okay. I was getting like kind of backwards a little there. Yeah. So I guess maximum of 30 characters.
Well, I want it to be 100.
Yeah, let's do. Okay. I think it was 5 and 100 on your
Yeah, I just updated it to be 1 in 100 because I had an original idea to use like a random code, but it makes more sense to just let them specify whatever they want, and then we'll just not let them create it if it already exists. But we'll say name is required. We do have alpha num, but I also want to allow dashes. Let's look at their documentation to see. Let's look at the API reference.
Can we allow emojis?
Probably. Let's see. Like, an emoji is technically a Unicode character, so I don't know how we would validate for that. Let's see. String inherits from any. We already did min and max. We want to do, yeah, if we look at alpha num, I wonder if it has any options for dashes. Oh, we can do underscores. Requires the string to only contain A to Z, capital and lowercase, and 0 to 9. Token requires the string value to only contain A to Z, 0 through 9, and underscore. That could work. Then we wouldn't have to do anything, any special regex. Yeah, dash is nowhere to be found. Yeah, let's do token. So we'll say min 1. So alpha. Oh no, we just want to say token instead of alpha num. And we found that in the docs. Basically, token allows us to be alphanumeric with underscores. It would be cool to allow emojis though. Is there anything for Unicode? The Unicode normalization form to use. I mean, we could just do a regular expression that says like no special characters, like anything on the top row of the keyboard.
Yeah, we could just do that.
That. What's that?
A token?
What's that?
Was that not included under token?
No, so token, oh cool, my editor's being really helpful. Like lowercase, uppercase, numbers, and underscore. We could try it. And actually, I think we should just leave it this way so it's fairly simple and minimal. But yeah, later on we'll try to create a URL with an emoji in the name. Okay, and then we also want to validate the URL. So let's figure out how to do that. I think we did this last time when we created our message board. So we can do string.uri. So let's copy this in.
Yeah, we use this, I think, to get the GIF image.
Right, to make sure that the image had a URL in it. Okay, so Tony, so in this scheme, get rid of git, because we don't want git. And we want it to, and just get rid of that line as well. And then get rid of this, I think. And this says it should begin with HTTP, and then the S is optional. I think that should work. Actually, let's look at what we did last time. So if we go to our repo with the message board server, we can look in our DB, look at our messages. Yeah, that's what we did last time. Cool. All right, so this will validate the thing that's being created. Now let's look at their documentation again to see how we actually use it. Yes, this. All right, so we defined our schema there. Here, when we create it, is when we want to validate it. So we want to update this, Tony, to say joy.validate, and then we want to pass in, instead of that object, pass in almost puny. Instead of this entire, I guess I'll help you out. So instead of that, we want to pass in almost puny, because that is the object with the URL and the name that we're trying to validate. Cool, yeah. And, we'll put it on the same line. It doesn't need to be an object, because this already is an object, so we can just pass it in as is. And then we can check for an error. So result.error is null, then it's valid. So Tony, we want to say if result.error is null, then we're going to say urls.insert and pass in almost puny. And otherwise, so do an else. And we'll do return promise, capital promise, dot reject, and then pass in result.error. Yeah. Okay, and on line 25, we want to return that as well, because that we're actually returning the insert into the database. And so just to clarify, like, what's happening here, URLs is our URLs collection in MongoDB. And so this is like a direct connection to the database. And when we say insert right here, we're inserting this object into the database. Okay, lastly, do module.exports equals an object. And then inside of the object, put create. Yeah, and so we're going to be exporting this create function from here. Sorry, let's do that. So that inside of our routes, we can call the create function, which is what we were already doing. So if we look at our index.js, we said create with the body of the request. And just so we can see what's happening, let's log the body of the request that comes in. Then we'll do urls.create. Have I used async await with you, Tony?
I think so.
Okay. Because that's what I want to use right now instead of like a dot then. So here's what we'll do. Right in front of the parens right there, say async. And then do a space. So the monk package is promise space. So whenever we do insert, this actually returns a promise that will eventually finish whenever it's done inserting into the database. But we can use async await instead of doing a dot then on the promise. So we're going to do async. And then right here, say const URL equals await. Yes. And then after that, we'll just say res.json and pass in the URL. So if it was successful, we're going to send back the URL that just got created. Awesome. The interesting thing about this, though, is if this throws an error. So when we do promise.reject, this would actually throw an error. And in that case, we want to send back an error instead. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a try catch. So just type the word try, Tony. Press tab. Do a try catch. Press tab. Yeah. And so the way this works is we can say try this code here. If it's successful, that's fine. Send back the URL. Everything is great. If it's not successful, we're going to catch the error. And this is where we're actually like send an error back to the front end. So do a res.json and pass in the error. And right above that, do a res.status and pass in 500. Yes. So we're basically sending back a server error that says, hey, you tried to create this thing and it didn't validate. Cool. So we've got the basics of creating. So let's just see if this works. We'll create the front end to actually send it, but then we want to do some more validation, and we want to make sure that the name that they're specifying isn't already in use. But let's go to the front end code to actually try and send some data to this route. Do you have any questions about what we've done so far, Tony?
I don't think so. Not right now.
Okay. So, to the front end. Take a quick break first. Okay. So, on our front end, we've already brought in Vue.js, but now we're going to bring in a script file. So just do a script src. And let's call this main.js. Cool. And now inside of our public folder, we're going to create this main.js file. All right, so in here is where we're going to create our Vue app. So say new Vue. Do a capital V. Then pass in an object. Invoke it and then pass in an object. Yep. And then do a new line. And inside of this object, we want a property called EL. And the value in single quotes will be pound app. Yes, so we're going to put ID app on one of our elements, and that's where our Vue.js app is going to live. So inside of our HTML, let's put ID app on just our main tag here. So the section up top, that won't be part of the Vue app. That'll just stay as it is. And on main is where we'll make this a Vue app. So just say ID equals app. Just app, app. Yeah. Because this ID app syncs up with this. So it tells Vue that that's where the code is going to live. All right. So now we want to hook up our form. So on this, create a data property, and data is just going to be an object. Curly braces. Curly braces? Are you there, Tony? 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 I can't hear you, Tony.
Yeah, I just got like a tornado warning. I think I gotta go.
Oh, really? Okay. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Get in your bathtub.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for doing this to me, but stay safe, man.
Yeah. I'll call you later or something.
All right, cool. All right, later, dude.
All right. Bye.
Okay, well. Tony is in the middle of a tornado, so I will finish the app without him. That's very unfortunate. Actually, I'm gonna look up weather in Columbus real quick. I'm interested, concerned. I think he's in Columbus. Risk just upgraded. Widespread threat ramping up. Wait, that's not Columbus. Weather in motion. I'm not sure where he is. Maybe he's here. Maybe he's lying and he didn't want to stream anymore. I don't know. Stay safe out there, Tony. All right, so I'll finish up the app without him. But basically, we were hooking up this form. So we put ID app, so that hooks up the main element here, and basically we want to keep track of the input for our URL. So on this input, I'm going to do vmodel is URL, and then I'm going to make this a required input, and on the input for the name, we're going to say vmodel is name, and I'm also going to make this required. So we have these two vmodels, and we want to represent those on our data. So in our JavaScript, we'll say name is an empty string, and URL is an empty string. Now we want to listen for whenever this form is submitted, we're going to make the request to the server. So we'll give this a class, make this a button, and give it a type of submit. So when we click it, it calls the submit event of the form. So on the form, we'll say @submit.prevent to prevent the default action equals create puny. So we'll then need this function called create puny. So in Vue.js, you have access to methods. And on here, we can say create puny. And for now, let's just log this.name and this.url, so we can see what was actually entered, what was actually entered into the form. Okay, so now we go back to the browser, we refresh, and if I try to shorten https://google.com, and the name will be Google, punify. Yeah, so we're getting that in. Now we actually want to send that to the server. So for this, I'm just going to do a fetch request. So I'll do fetch. We're going to fetch /API/puny, because this is the client side code that's going to be calling the route that's defined right here. We're going to be sending data to this route. So we'll do a fetch, and then we have to pass in some parameters. We need to tell it that the method is post. So this exactly matches up with our backend route here. We're telling it that when we see a post request on this URL, this is the request handler that's going to run. So we're sending data to that. And then we also need a body. The body is just going to be an object that has a name, which is this.name, and a URL, which is this.url. And this, we can't just send to the server as is. We have to turn this into a JSON string. So here's what I'll do. I'll store this in a variable called body. And then here I'll say body is is JSON.stringify the body. So this takes this plain old JavaScript object and turns it into a JSON string so that the server can actually receive it. And so that's what will be sent. And then the last thing is we need to tell the server what kind of data we're sending it. So in the headers, we can specify content type. And this is where we'll say application/JSON. And what this is saying is I am sending this data in my body to the server on this URL as a post request, and the contents of the body is JSON. And so when the server receives that request, it comes into the app. BodyParser.json sees, hey, the content type of the body is JSON, so I'm going to parse that. So it parses it into the body. And then when it reaches here, rec.body is now a JSON object, is now a JavaScript object that we can use in our code. Okay, so that will happen. We'll do a .then to get back the result. And we will also do a dot. Well, actually, we need to. Yeah, we'll just log this for now. Eventually, we need to do like result.json, and then we could get access to that result and log that here. This I would actually call a response, though. Okay, so we get the response, and then we turn it into JSON. But let's see what happens. So on this page, we're going to attempt to send data to this backend route here. So we are here. We will refresh. We'll show the server logs because we are logging the body as it comes in. So we should see that actually hit. And so if we try to shorten google.com with the name Google, punify, it worked. So you see this log right here is the data that was sent into the server. So on the server side, we're actually logging that right here. So when we do the post request from the client, that reaches this request handler and then logs out the body there. Cool. We were able to create it, and then we responded with that. Cool. Let's see what happens if I try to send in like an invalid URL. So something like without HTTP. This should not work. Punify. And I did get back a 500 error. And status text is internal server error. And then when we actually turned it into JSON, we got a validation error, which should be that the URL was not formatted correctly. URL must be a valid URI with scheme. Let's see. Matching the pattern HTTPS question mark. So we are doing the validation to make sure that the URL is actually a URL. Cool. So that's great. One thing I want to show though is like an example of what their URL would look like while they're typing in the name. So let's do this. Oh yeah, instead of name, in the UI, we'll just say puny.li/ because whatever they type here is what eventually they'll be able to type into the URL. So puny.li/ whatever their name is, and that's what's going to do the redirect. Cool. Awesome. Let's just do this. If it was successful, we'll hide this form and like show what their URL is. So if success, if not success, we'll create a variable to say whether or not this was successful. Emmy is saying the internet is saying that the tornado warning in Ohio will be in effect until 6:30 p.m. Dang. I hope he's okay. I'll definitely reach out to him afterwards. Okay, so if the request was successful, we're going to hide the form, and then below it we'll just show like what got created. So we'll do like an h1 with like text centered. And we'll just say, well, it will be an anchor tag so they can click on it. And it will say puny.li/ name. And when they click it, we're going to go to puny, we'll do slash, we'll bind this. When they click the link, we're going to go to slash plus whatever the name is. And then that will redirect. Let's see. We'll throw an HTTPS on there just to show what it looks like. Right now, when we're running on localhost, it should still work because we're doing a relative path as the href. Cool. So let's do this. We'll take a quick break. We are going to say in here. So if we look at what got logged, do I still have access to that? No. Let's try again. So if I attempt to shorten this URL to be GitHub URL shortener, use underscores, punify, then in the response, we should get access to this information. But if there was an error, like if I were to not specify that, in the response, we get is joy. So here's what we'll do. We'll say if is joy, then it failed. So if result dot is joy, there was an error, show it. Else success is true. And so we'll initialize success to false. And then here we'll just say this dot success is true. So we successfully created the URL. And I believe that should do it. So we'll try again with this URL. Where am I at? Here. And we'll do message JS. Cool. And this is what I wanted to show, like what, oh, that's showing by default. Yeah, this is what I want to show on success, because this will show like what the link is, and they can actually click on it. So let's do this. In the UI, we'll only show the H1. And actually, it's not very big. I want like really big text. Let's look at Bulma real quick for like typography. In the chat, Briggs is saying, please deploy on VPS hosting like Vultr. I've never used Vultr before. I was planning on deploying to now.sh. It's super simple to deploy an Express backend with it. I'll look into Vultr. Do they have like a free development tier? Yeah, and the one thing about now is for open source, it's totally free, and then they have like a monthly package where you can deploy as many as you want. It actually runs your apps in Docker containers, so that's what I will be using, so I don't have to pay for anything. Yeah, let's find typography in Bulma. Elements, title, simple headings. Sizes. I want like the biggest size possible. Title is 1. Whoa. And we only want to show this if we successfully created it. Okay, so let's say we try to shorten this URL. And then the URL will be, I don't know, like message JS. Punify. It was successful, so we actually show the link that they can click and share. Cool. I would actually open this link in a new tab just so they don't leave this page. Like so. Okay. let's no longer log the response. Well, actually we will, because I do want to show the error on the page. I know the error object has a details array that has messages in it. Let's get an error again just so we can actually log the errors. So oh, we're not logging it. Dang it. We should be able to look in the network tab though. Yeah, so details is an array of objects that have a message property that is like the validation rules. So here's what I'll do. I'll say, let's have an error on our data that is initially just an empty string. And then whenever if there is an error, we'll say this.error is result.details.map, and you get each object, and we want to get back the message property, and then we only want a string, so we'll join it all together on spaces with a period if there were multiple errors. So if that works, let's just log this.error. Yeah, detail.message, that should be good. So if we try this again, Punify. The error is URL must be a valid URI with a scheme matching that pattern. So let's show like an alert on the page. If we look in components, maybe card, modal, elements, notification. Yeah, we want something like this danger one. So let's do this. So we'll have a div in our UI. Let's put it right at the top of the form. And we'll say only show this if there is an error. And just inside of here, we're just going to put error. So now we should see the error on the page. So let's try one last time. If we put in a URL and then we put in something, well, the URL won't work because it doesn't have a valid URI. Do that. We get this error message and then we can, oh, that's submitting it? What? Here, let's not show it. I think that'll get rid of the close button. Yeah, so there's no close button now. And then we'll hide the error, and we'll also actually, I think that's good for now, because if it's successful, then the form disappears anyways, and it shows the latest results. So let's try to do something that will work. We'll say like Bulma notification, punify, and then we get a puny link with that short URL. Awesome. Making progress. Just a second. Cool. Okay, so the front end is working beautifully. One thing that we want to add to the back end, though, is some validation. So we're now showing any errors, and we're showing the created link on the page. That's great. But on the back end, when we insert it, we want to make sure that the name is not in use, meaning there has not been a puny link created before that has this same name. So here in our database code, instead of just directly inserting it, first we want to search the database for anything that has this name, and if it does, we return an error. Otherwise, we just insert it. So that should be easy enough. We'll say urls.find, And actually, let me pull up the Monk docs because you can see all of the methods that are available to us. Error loading page. What? I think this is the one. Cool. Yeah, so you have all of these methods available to you. Find one, group, insert, remove. I think find one should work for us. So we want to find one where the name is the thing. Yeah, definitely, exactly like that. So we'll say URLs that find one where name is almost puny dot name. And we can actually use async await inside of here as well. So I'll make this an async function. And then we'll say URL will be await that. And we'll say if the URL was not found, then we do the insert. Simple enough. So try to find one that already exists with that name. If there was one that didn't exist, just insert it into the database. Good to go. If it did exist, we want to return an error. So we'll return promise.reject. Actually, just to make it work because of the way I'm sending back this error, I'm going to say is joy here is true. And then we have details, which is an array of objects, and the message is short name is in use. Okay, so that should be all we need. So if they try to create a new puny that has the same name as an existing one, they should get back an error now. So let's try on the front end. So let's punify this. Body-parser. Punify. Oh, we can't do dashes. We have to do underscores. Punify. Okay, so that created it. But now, if we try to create the same one with the same name, it should give us an error and say that it already exists. Short name is in use. Awesome. So now multiple people can't create the same short URL with the same name. Sweet. So if you are joining in late, Tony had a tornado warning in his area, so he had to leave. So I am finishing up the app, and I realize I might be going a little bit faster than I would have if Tony was hanging out. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask. And at the end of this all, I will kind of review everything that we built. All right, so the last thing is we need to create a route to redirect a URL, because right now, if we create one that actually works, when I click this, that URL wasn't found. So I need a route that will essentially take in a name and then find it in the database and then redirect the user to that URL. So let's do this. In our Express app, we need a route. We'll say app.get/name. So when you make a request to slash something, this request handler will run. And we will attempt to find it. So we'll say like urls.find rec.params.name. And we'll do a similar thing. So we call our find function that we need to define, pass in the name. If it finds something, or even if it doesn't, it's going to send it back. And then we'll say this, if URL existed, so if we actually found something with that name, then we're going to do a res.redirect with, and actually let's call this puny instead of a URL. We'll redirect to puny.url. Easy. Else, we will redirect to a 404 page that we'll need to create. And we'll say the name of the thing that was not found. Okay, so now we need to create this find function for our URLs. Let's take a quick break. So in here, we now need a function called find. Let's do that here. So we pass it in the name, and we basically want to do this very similar thing. And actually, we'll just return that. So go into the database and find the puny that has that name. It'll send it back here, and if we found it, we will redirect to that URL. If we didn't find it, we're going to go to a 404 page and display a message with that name. That should be all we need, so let's try it. So now if we try to go to body parser 2, see, are there any server errors? Yes. Type error urls.find is not a function. Oh, I need to export it. So this function needs to be exported from this file down here at the bottom, like that. Okay, so now when I try to go to this URL, almost puny is, oh, I'm messing up. This just needs to be name because we're passing in the name. I'm going to review everything we just did here, and we'll follow it back through, and everything will make sense. Okay, this is the one. Go. Yeah, and notice it redirected. Cool. So this, yeah, that worked. And if we try to go to localhost 5000 to something that doesn't exist, it should redirect to 404.html. And let's make sure that it's sending that back. Oh, well, once we create it, that won't happen again. So in our public folder, let's just duplicate the current index.html, and we'll create a new file, call it 404.html, and just right in here, we're just going to display a big error message, say name was not found. And actually, I don't even need to bring in Vue.js for this. We're just going to display the error message here. So we'll do something like, whoa, do that. Some name that you tried to go to was not found. You can create it here, and we'll just link back to the home page where they can create it. So we'll create an anchor tag. href goes to /, and we'll throw this on there. Okay, right now name will be empty, but let's try this again. So if I try to go to / something that doesn't exist, name was not found, you can create it here, and we'll do some simple JavaScript to grab the name out of the URL. Okay, and that's what I was saying, that we're not going to use Vue.js for the 404 page because it's super simple. we can just do a simple script tag. We can say new URL search params, pass in window.location dot search or query. Is it in there? Search is what we want, I think. And then we'll say .get name. So this is a way of parsing the URL to grab out the query string. And let's just say name is that. And then for now, we'll just log it out to make sure that we're getting it. So if I do refresh, yeah, so that's grabbing the name. Now I just need to update that on the thing with ID name. So I'll say document.query selector, the element with the ID name, set its text content to be the name. Just like that. So now if you go to something, ASDF was not found, you can create it here. And then it takes you to the creation form. Cool. I wonder if they have any classes to give like this, just a different color so it stands out a little bit more. Let's see. Elements. Overview. Customize. Well, no, I don't want to customize it. Colors. Wonder if do we have access to these like with just CSS? CSS classes. Modifiers. Color helpers. There we go. Yeah, so let's make that has text danger, because then that will make the name itself red. Okay. So there we go. ASDF was not found. You can create it here. Cool. I think we have a working URL shortener. Let me look at my checklist. So search by name, if not found, redirect URL. No, if found, redirect. If not found, show a 404. I believe we've done it. Yeah, let's review the features of the app, and then I'll review the code of the app. And actually, I'll start this deploy really quick because I want to be able to use this. I did actually buy this domain today, so I should actually be able to get it working. Yeah, let me just try the deploy real quick. So I guess I am going to have to create a database on MongoLab, but that's okay. So this is a Git repo. Git status. Everything is new. Yeah. So I'm going to add everything. And then now it's going to create all those things. It's not committing my node modules. That's a good thing. So I'm going to commit add working solution. Cool. And actually, we'll go ahead and push this up to GitHub. The URL, the URL to GitHub is in the description if you want to check out the code that we've been writing. Okay, so that's on GitHub. Let me now try to deploy it. So I am going to be using a tool called now.sh. It's a command line tool for deploying Node apps, and I believe any app that can run inside of a Docker container. And the way it works with Node is it detects your package JSON and then knows that it should install all of your dependencies. It looks at your start script and figures out how to start it up. The one thing is we have one environment variable that we need to take care of, which is the URI to our Mongo database. For that, I am going to use imlab. They're a site that lets you create pay-as-you-go Mongo databases, but you can also create like a one for just hobby development for free. So I am going to sign up, and I'm going to hide my screen while I do this. You'll see my screen shortly. Cool. So I signed up on the website, and now I have the ability to create a database. So if I do environments, MongoDB deployments, email verification required. Okay, let me verify my email real quick. Okay. So I think I want a deployment, create a new deployment. I don't want a deployment, or I do sandbox, because that's totally free. Click continue. Let's get the one in Virginia, continue. Database name is Puny. Continue. This should be good. Free, submit order. Awesome, so I have a deployment, and now I'm going to need to get a connection string. So if I go to that deployment, this is db user, db password, and I need to create a user so that I can connect to this database. So let's add a database user, and the database username will just be Puny, and I will hide the database password. I'll probably update everything after the live stream, just in case anyone was watching and like tries to like drop my database or something like that. Cool. Yeah, and Briggs is mentioning in the chat a Vue and like MySQL deployed app for future videos. Definitely. I do want to try some like other databases. So far on the streams, I've done like Mongo, Postgres, MySQL. Probably could be done in a very similar way to what I've done with Postgres using a library like Connects. But definitely. Okay, so I've created a database user, and when Express connects to this on the back end, it'll all work itself out. But essentially, this is going to be my connection URL. So whatever the username of the user that you create, and then whatever password. And then this, you're going to want to set as an environment variable when you deploy. So what I'm going to need to do is once you've installed the now CLL tool, you can do now secret or secrets. And you can add a secret. So I want to add a secret so that when I deploy, I can use this connection string that has like my username and password in it without leaking that in my GitHub repo or anywhere else like that. So I can do now secrets add, and you add the name. In this case, I'm going to say Puny. Well, actually, yeah, I can call it anything I want. I'm going to call this Puny DB connection. And then the value is going to be this, but you fill it in with your username and password. Jibs is asking, what is this font face? I think this is Anonymous Pro. It's the same font face. Yeah, it's the same font face I'm using inside of my code editor. It's called Anonymous Pro. Cool. But so this is going to add the secret, and then we deploy, we can use the secret. So I'm going to hide my screen again while I put in my username and password. Yeah, and on my editor, it's Anonymous Pro. I'm hiding it. I'm still going to probably just like drop the database after the stream, just because if anyone gets access to it, they could do anything they want with it. Welcome, Jibs. Thanks for stopping by. Okay, so oh no, not that. That was the intro song, sorry. I ran that command, which added the secret. Now I want to deploy my app to now using that secret. So I'm going to do now, I'm going to do -e, and I specify an environment variable. And actually, we can look at now help to see how to deploy. Yeah, so I want to say now -e MongoDB URI equals, and then at the name of the secret that I created. So this needs to match whatever it is inside of your code. So in my code, it's MongoDB URI. So I'm saying when we deploy this app, the MongoDB URI is going to be with the secret at that specific location. Go. Yeah, and to get now, you can just do now npm install -g now. They also have a desktop tool where I believe you can just like drag and drop a folder to deploy a site. And so now this is working, and it created this URL. Okay, so we're on the internet, and let's try to shorten something. So let's put that there. We'll say puny GitHub. Punify. Oh yeah, we can't have dashes. It can only be underscores. Punify. It created it, and then right now we're not deployed to puny.li yet, so the URL is actually that. But if we go there, it redirects. Yay! Awesome. So one thing I do want to do is put it on that domain that I bought earlier today. So the way that works is now alias. You put in the long URL that now gave you when it generated the app. It'll tell you what the long URL is, and then you tell it what you want to alias it as, puny.li. And I already have a Cname set up, and I bought my domain on Namecheap, and I have a Cname set up that points at alias.zeet.co, which is the now domain. One thing I'm gonna have to do right now is verify it. I'll show you my Namecheap dashboard so you can see the different things that I had to add in there. Cool. So I need to do a little bit of further validation. I have to add this text record so that Zeet knows that I actually own this puny.li domain. I'm gonna hide my screen real quick so I can show you my Namecheap dashboard. Cool. And so you can use any domain provider you want to hook this up. I'm just using Namecheap, and you need a couple of records. The first one is the Cname record, and so that's telling that puny.li points to alias.zeet.co, and this is an alias for now.sh. The company is called Zeet, or something like that. This is a redirect, so if somebody types www.puny.li, it just redirects back to puny.li. And then this is the validation text record that they just wanted me to add to verify that I actually own this domain. And that should be all you need. The text record is going to take a little while to kick in. I'm going to do a review of what I just built, and then we'll try to deploy to that domain again, and it should be good to go. We'll have an actual URL shortener on puny.li. It'll be awesome. Okay, to the code. Starting with our index.js. So we've created a basic Express app, it is bringing in Morgan for logging and body parser for parsing the incoming request from the client. We have some database code we wrote to talk to MongoDB. We're using some middleware. The first one is the tiny logger. So actually, if you've seen in the logs, like while I'm running the app, here I'll run it locally. So when a request comes into the app on localhost 5000, everything that gets request actually gets logged to the console there, and that's that Morgan package that's doing that for us. So that's pretty convenient. And then body parser knows how to look at the body of a request, and then this serves up our public folder as static files. So all of our simple static files and like Vue.js are in the public folder, and Express is serving that up if those are requested. We then have a get route to find a puny URL for the given name. So when you go to / some short URL, it searches the database to find the one that has that name. And if it finds it, it'll redirect immediately to its URL. If it doesn't find it, it redirects to a 404 page. Then we also have a route for creating a puny URL. This is at API/puny, and you do a post request to this URL. The body of the request should have the URL and then the short name of the puny that you're trying to create. We have our custom function that validates it and then creates it. And then if it's successful, it sends back the URL. If there were any errors, we set the status to 500 and then respond with an error. And then we just start up our app. So let's look at that database code. First thing is code to connect to the database. So we're using the package called Monk. It's a super simple package for connecting to MongoDB. There are other packages out there. Mongoose is probably one of the most popular ones, but it's a little bit heavier than Monk. It has like schema validation and stuff like that all built in. Monk is just like really simple, talk directly to the Mongo database. Then we need a connection URL. I have MongoDB installed locally on my machine. So the URL locally is just localhost /puny-li. And I'm not talking to Tony anymore, so I don't need to be wearing these. I can't believe I've been wearing those for like the past, I don't know how long I didn't need to be. But locally, when we connect to the database, that's the URL. And then when we deploy, we have an environment variable that will have the deployed URL in there. So we deployed to now, but our database actually exists on this place called MongoLab. And so when the now server starts up, it's actually communicating with the database on MongoLab. And then to start up Monk with that connection, you just pass in the connection URL, and then we're exporting this connection to use in our other file. So in this file, we're using Joy, which is a validation library. It's a super simple validation library. We're bringing in that connection, and then db.get is the way of saying I want to either insert or read documents from the collection with the name URLs. So this is actually our, if you're familiar with SQL, this would be like our table that we're getting rows from or putting rows into. In Mongo, it's known as a document store. And here we have some basic schema validation. We make sure that the name of the short URL is a token, which means it's A to Z, uppercase and lowercase, 0 through 9, and underscores. So we don't want any special characters in the name. And then it has a maximum of 100 characters, and it's required. And then also the URL, actually I just realized, should also be required. I'll redeploy. I'll redeploy with that in there. But this just makes sure that the URL has an actual protocol on it. And then we have a simple find method. So URLs is the connection to the database. We say find one where the name is the given name. And this is the one we use when we're doing like a redirect to that URL. And then for creation, we first validate it using the thing that got sent from the client side. And if there was no error, we first make sure that there is not already a puny in our database that has that name. And if there wasn't, we'll insert that puny into the database. And then if there was, we return an error that says short name is in use. And then if there was a validation error, we just return, we'll just do a promise.reject of the validation error. So we handle that on this side over here. So that's all of the server-side code, and then the client-side code is simply just making a post request to this route to actually create the puny URL. So if we look at that code, we have our index.html, which really just has a form on it. So we're reusing Bulma for CSS. We've got the main hero image up at the top, and then a simple form where they can put in their URL. They can put in the name for the puny, and then when they submit it, that actually makes the request to the server. And then we have some client-side JavaScript that is a simple Vue.js app that has some information for the form, whether or not the creation was successful, and then if there was an error, it will get stored in there. Before I move on, Briggs is asking in the chat, can't we just install the database on now without using imlab? Sorry for the new question. As far as I know, possibly. Like, because they support Docker containers, you might actually be able to find a Docker container that has a MongoDB on it. However, I don't know how much storage you get by default in these deployments. And as far as I know, now really isn't for that purpose. Imlab specifically hosts MongoDB servers, and if you use a service like Heroku, they actually use, if you're adding MongoDB, they actually use Imlab. They just integrate with Heroku. If you're using Postgres or I think even MySQL on Heroku, they have their own way of deploying to those databases. But as far as I know, you can't directly use MongoDB on now. It might be possible. I don't know. Now.sh MongoDB. Yeah, use a hosted database with Zeets now. So that is probably a tutorial on like connecting to Imlab. So basically what I just did, this tutorial is talking about how to do that. Pronto, a nowish experience for databases. Well, that's interesting. So this might actually be a command line tool to just deploy a database. Oh, that's really cool. And it supports all of these databases. That looks awesome. I'm gonna coming back and look at that later. Cool. But we were reviewing client-side code, so we got a basic Vue app. All of our data goes in here. We have our function that gets called when the form is submitted. So we create the body of our request, which just has the name and the URL. We're using the built-in fetch to send the data to the server. So this is making a post request to API/puny. So this is the client-side code that's communicating with our backend code here. So this is just this specific route. So this is the client-side code that's making the request to the backend code there. And we stringify the body because with fetch you have to just send the data as a string, and we tell the server that the data we're sending it as a string is JSON. And so when the server sees this, the body parser package kicks in to actually parse it as JSON. Then we get back the response. We can actually stop logging it now. We turn it into JSON. If it was joy, then we know that there was an error, so we actually just show the error on the page. And then if there was no error, we set success to true, which just displays your short URL that you can click on. And that's pretty much it for the client side. Anyone watching, any last questions or comments before I redeploy and then attempt to put it on the domain that I created? That's good. Yep. Cool. And so now now that I changed some things in my code, I want to redeploy to now. You just use the now command again. So I'm going to use that exact same now-e. Let's take a quick break. And deploy. And the thing about now is every time you deploy, you get a brand new URL. So they have a way of deleting old deployments, but for the most part, you can just leave them. They'll just go to sleep and sleep forever. But this will be a brand new URL, and I'll attempt to actually alias this one to our to the domain that I created and see if that's working yet. Cool. So if I do now alias that puny.li, what? It didn't copy it. And yeah, I want to make sure that this matches the thing that just got deployed. And the other cool thing about now is once it deploys, it automatically adds a SSL certificate for you as well. Yeah, so domain added, certificate generated. Ah, it works. Okay, so now we can go to puny.li. Look at that short URL service. Okay, so let's try it out. I think our first shortened URL is going to be like to the code base itself. So the URL is that. We'll say puny GitHub. Punify. Oh yeah. Man, I should make it so that we can use dashes. Right now we have it so they have to be underscores, but punify. Oh, we already created that. Well, since we already created it, we can actually go to it. So if I do puny.li/punygithub, that redirects to GitHub, which is awesome. Let's create one for Coding Garden. So the URL, https://coding.garden. Let's do a super short URL, cg, punify. Cool. And so now if I go to puny.li/cg, it redirects to Coding Garden. Huh? I'll share it in the chat. Try it out. Briggs in the chat says, you deserve more subscribers. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Click my short link and create short links of your own. And please don't drop my database. That was super fun. All the code is on GitHub. So yeah, if you go to that short URL, puny.li/punygithub, that will redirect to all of the code that I built today. This typically is Newby Tuesdays, but Tony had a tornado warning, so he had to go, and I finished up the app. But we pretty much got to everything I wanted to get to. A stretch feature, maybe you can implement this yourself, is to add logs whenever a link is clicked on, and then you could keep track of how many times someone clicks your short link, and then have a page with like some analytics of when it's clicked and how many times it was clicked. You could even store the IP address of people that click on it and stuff like that too. Awesome. I am really glad I got this custom domain. Puny. Shortening URLs since 2018. Sweet. All right, that's all I have for you. If you look on my YouTube channel, you can see my upcoming streams. You can click set reminder on those. Tomorrow night is Code Katas, one of my favorite streams. I solved Code Wars Code Katas. So if you're not familiar with Code Wars, it's a place where you can practice coding with various coding problems in various languages. I do all of my solutions in JavaScript, and they have tons and tons of different ones, but I just stream for an hour and a half, 2 hours, solving various ones, solving them in multiple ways, answering questions in the chat, and then also potentially doing any katas that people suggest. So if you check out my Coding Garden GitHub, there is a repo for katas. And in the issue tracker, you can suggest any katas that you'd like me to do live on the stream, and I'll give them a shot. Announcement on this coming Sunday, so May 20th, Brooks from Brooks Builds, the channel on YouTube and Twitch, he's going to pair with me, and we're going to build a breakout game with P5.js. So I have never really worked with P5.js. I've watched a lot of Coding Train, This is Dan Schiffman, and he uses tons of P5.js and stuff like that, but I've never really built my own app with it, kind of just like watched him do it. And Brooks has worked with it before, so we're going to pair on it and build a breakout game, so that's going to be pretty fun. And that's Sunday at 3 p.m. Mountain Time. And yeah, if you check out coding.garden, you can see my upcoming stream schedule as well. Brick says, favorite stream is Newby Tuesdays, don't know why. Appreciate it. Keep up the amazing work, man. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. This would not be possible unless you were watching, so thanks for tuning in. I think that's all I want to talk about. Yeah, I think that's it. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you tomorrow at 8:20 p.m. Mountain Time for Code Katas. Here is this.